Count disguised himself to spy on his wife with her lover, and froze when he saw what she was doing. Before we begin this beautiful period romance story, tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I love knowing where you're joining me from. Raffaele Bardi had spent most of his life believing that silence was a sign of peace. In the grand halls of Palazzo Bardi, silence often meant order, courtesy, or dignity. But on that particular night, silence wrapped itself around him like an invisible chain. It followed him across the marble corridor, brushed against his shoulders, and lingered in the corners, whispering a rumor he wished he had never heard. The servants spoke softly, as servants always did, yet their words traveled farther than they intended. A handmaid had murmured to another that the Contessa had left the palazzo after dusk. A footman added that she had slipped out with no attendants. Another voice mentioned that this was not the first time. None of them spoke of betrayal directly, but the implication shivered between their sentences, too sharp to ignore. Raphael heard every whisper, not because he wished to eavesdrop, but because the rumor clung to the air. When a rumor came from many mouths, it stopped being a whisper. It became a question. He paused outside the ballroom, where music floated lightly, as though unaware of his tightening breath. Inside, nobles moved with unhurried grace. He forced himself to enter, offering greetings, exchanging brief remarks, trying to keep his mind steady. He found Isabella near the center of the room, speaking to a visiting marchesa. Her smile looked calm, her posture flawless, her hands steady as she held a glass. Yet something about her eyes revealed a flicker of strain, as though she were counting the minutes. When she noticed him watching, she inclined her head softly. It should have comforted him. Instead, it left him colder. Raphael moved toward her, but before he reached her, another gentleman stopped him for a conversation he could not avoid. When he finally excused himself, Isabella was gone, vanished from the hall, as though she had never been there. He felt the ground shift under his feet. The rumor gained weight. A servant approached him with concern. "Your Excellency, shall I look for the Contessa?" "No," Raphael answered too quickly. "I will find her myself." He walked the length of the palazzo, opening doors with a quiet urgency. Her favorite salon was empty. The gallery was silent. Her reading room showed no trace of her presence. He entered her private chamber at last, and found it perfectly arranged. Too perfectly. The lamp was unlit and the bed untouched. He stepped back into the corridor, heart drumming. Isabella had left the palazzo again. He remembered the servants' whispers, the Contessa leaving quietly, dressed plainly, walking alone, as though she belonged to a different world. His mind fought against suspicion, but the truth pressed closer with every breath. If he wished to know where she went, he had to follow her. Not as her husband, not as the Count, but as someone invisible, someone she would not notice. He went to his valet, Pietro, a loyal man who had served him since his youth. Pietro frowned when Raffaele requested simple clothes, the kind worn by merchants returning home after a long day. "Your Excellency," Pietro murmured, "this does not seem fitting." "It is necessary," Raffaele replied. "No questions." Pietro hesitated only a moment before obeying. Raffaele removed his fine coat and replaced it with rough wool. His hair, normally impeccably arranged, he ruffled lightly. He looked nothing like a nobleman, yet the disguise left him strangely exposed. A count without his title felt like a man without armor. As he stepped outside the palazzo, the early night wrapped around him. Lanterns cast warm halos along the streets, but the air held a sharp edge. He pulled the hood over his head, hoping no one would see through the disguise. He walked with purpose, following instincts sharpened by anxiety. Isabella would not go toward the noble district. She would choose paths where no one knew her face. He crossed a small bridge and kept low, his eyes searching for her familiar shape. A group of merchants passed him, speaking loudly about the day's sales. A pair of women hurried by with baskets. A carriage rumbled in the distance. He scanned every figure until he reached the foot of the bridge, and his breath caught. There she was. Isabella stood at the far end of the bridge, cloaked in dark fabric. No jewels, no embroidery, nothing that proclaimed her rank. She looked like a woman trying to disappear. Raphael crouched behind a stone railing, watching her. She turned her head once, checking the shadows, her expression tense. Then she moved toward the artisan quarter, each step carrying an urgency he had never seen in her. He followed at a distance, careful to keep his footsteps soft. His thoughts raced. If she was meeting a lover, what would he do? Confront her? Turn away? Or pretend he never saw? Jealousy stabbed at him before he could stop it. But another emotion rose with equal force: fear. If she was walking alone in these streets, she carried more risk than she understood. Isabella turned a corner and approached a modest house tucked behind a row of shops. Its windows were shuttered, its door almost hidden. She knocked once, waited a moment, then entered. Raphael pressed himself behind a wooden cart, breathing shallowly. He waited for the sound of another person arriving, someone who would greet her with forbidden familiarity. But no one came. The street remained quiet. He edged toward the window, where a thin line of light escaped through the shutters. He lifted himself just enough to see inside. His heart froze. Inside the small room, Isabella kneeled on the floor beside an old wooden chest. Her cloak had fallen to the side, and her hands trembled slightly as she opened it. But instead of garments or love letters, the chest revealed papers, many papers, some stamped with official seals, others tied with cords, others marked with symbols he could not decipher. They looked nothing like the secret tokens of a romance. Raphael blinked, stunned. Isabella carefully unfolded one sheet and traced her finger over a list of names. Several had been crossed out, others circled. Each name seemed to weigh on her. The candle on the table flickered, casting gentle light on her face, not the face of a woman meeting a lover, but of someone wrestling with danger. Raphael pressed closer to the window, silently. His mind churned. What secrets was she hiding? What were these documents? Why would she keep them in a place like this? Isabella lifted another paper. Her lips moved as though she whispered to herself, repeating names, dates, or details he could not hear. He expected relief. After all, she was not with another man. Yet the feeling that filled him was not relief. It was dread. Because what she hid now felt far more serious. Isabella placed the documents back into the chest, but then she reached under the floorboard and retrieved a small metal key. She used it to unlock a drawer hidden beneath the wooden planks. Inside was a sealed envelope. She held it with trembling hands, as though the parchment itself carried a confession. Raphael stared, overwhelmed. If she feared something, why had she never told him? Why had she chosen secrecy over trust? What burden was she carrying alone? He pressed his forehead to the wall and breathed slowly. He needed time. He needed answers. Isabella sat at the small table and began writing something. Her handwriting moved quickly but with care. Each mark seemed intentional, as though the message she created was part of something larger. Raphael leaned forward, trying to see more, when Isabella suddenly stopped writing. She lifted her head. Her body stilled. Her eyes narrowed, focusing on something unseen, something outside. Raphael's entire body went cold. He ducked instantly, pressing himself flat against the wall beneath the window. Terrified, she had seen the shadow of his movement. Inside, the room stayed quiet. A full minute passed. Then he heard the soft sound of floorboards as she approached the window. Each step echoed in his chest. She stopped right behind the shutters. Raphael felt her presence through the wood. He held his breath, praying the darkness would hide him. He shut his eyes. He heard the window latch shift. She was about to open it. And in that single moment he knew that if she lifted that shutter, the truth of his disguise would crash into the room like a storm. The latch clicked again, louder this time, and the window began to move. Raphael pressed himself against the wall as the window groaned open just a breath. A sliver of lamplight spilled onto the stones near his feet. He remained perfectly still, silent, praying the hood shadowed his face well enough. Inside the room, Isabella inhaled, the kind of deep breath taken by someone searching for courage or clarity. Then, to his astonishment, she closed the window again without looking out. He exhaled slowly, heartbeat unsteady. She had sensed something, but not enough to discover him. He waited several moments before daring to move. When he finally stepped back, he walked as quietly as the stones permitted, distancing himself from the house as if retreat were the only safety. He reached the corner and leaned against a wall, chest rising fast. He needed to think, but thinking only made the questions multiply. Why had Isabella come to this house? Why hide documents? What were the names she whispered? Why had fear touched her face so sharply? He stood alone in the narrow street until the sound of distant steps nudged him back into motion. He could not remain here. Someone might recognize him. Or worse, someone might recognize her. He pulled the hood lower and walked away, circling through quieter alleys so he would not cross her path as she returned. The city changed as he walked. Houses grew older. Light grew thinner. The smell of cooling stone replaced the sense of noble estates. He felt oddly out of place, a man born to halls of marble now hiding in modest shadows. But he forced himself onward, his steps steady even as his mind raced. He reached a small plaza where a single lantern flickered on a crooked post. He took a moment to breathe. The disguise felt heavy on him. How many times had he walked through the city without being noticed? How many times had he believed he understood Florence simply because he governed a part of it? Tonight he realized how little he truly knew. When he turned into the next street, a voice startled him. "Good evening, traveler." Raphael stopped. A man stepped forward from a doorway, keeping a polite distance. He wore simple clothes, not unlike Raphael's disguise, though his posture carried the alertness of someone who observed more than he allowed others to see. "Evening," Raphael replied cautiously. The man studied him with sharp eyes. His hands were ink-stained, and his sleeves were rolled as though he had been working moments before. He offered a faint smile. "You seem far from your usual path." Raphael stiffened. He forced a casual tone. "I walk where I please." "Of course you do," the man said calmly. "Yet most men who walk here do so with purpose." Raphael did not answer. He felt a strange tension in the air, not hostile, but aware. The man stepped closer, and his gaze flicked toward the direction of the hidden house Isabella had entered. "You followed the lady," he said softly. Raphael's pulse jumped. He straightened, hiding his surprise. "I do not know what you mean." The stranger tilted his head. "Ah, then allow me to speak more clearly." He lowered his voice to a murmur. "Do not follow the Contessa again." For a moment the air around Raffaele seemed to still. He kept his voice calm, though it scraped against his throat. "And why not?" "Because what she does is not for curious eyes," the man said. "And curious eyes can invite trouble, even when they belong to someone with good intentions." Raffaele stepped closer, lowering his own voice. "Who are you?" "A friend of hers," the man answered simply. Raffaele narrowed his eyes. "Isabella has never spoken of you." The stranger shrugged lightly. "She speaks very little of the burdens she carries. That does not mean the burdens are small." Raphael felt both curiosity and unease. "If you are truly a friend, then tell me what she is doing." The man shook his head. "That is not for me to reveal. Her actions are not meant to harm you, but if you interfere before understanding, you may complicate what she is trying to protect." Raphael stepped even closer, lowering his voice to a whisper. "And what is she trying to protect?" The man hesitated, studying him as though weighing his sincerity. Then he offered a gentle yet firm answer. "Something more important than reputation. Something that demands courage she should not bear alone." Raphael felt the words settle uncomfortably in his chest. He knew he should demand more information, but the stranger's tone made him pause. The man showed no malice, only quiet urgency. "Tell me your name," Raffaele said. The stranger hesitated. Then he offered it. "Matteo." "Matteo," Raffaele repeated thoughtfully. "And you claim to know my wife?" Matteo nodded. "I do, though perhaps not in the way you imagine. She has sought my counsel. She trusts my discretion. I respect her courage." Raffaele clenched his hand inside his sleeve. Why would she trust a stranger and not her own husband? Matteo's expression softened slightly. "Because she fears the consequences might reach you. She thinks silence will shield you." The words pierced Raphael more than he expected. Silence, shield, consequences, all pieces of a puzzle he could not yet see. Matteo added quietly, "Do not assume betrayal where there is only fear. She walks carefully because she must." Raphael swallowed. "If she is in danger," Matteo interrupted with calm certainty. "She would never put herself in danger without care. She is cautious, very cautious, but she is also determined. That determination may catch the attention of others. That is why I warn you. Do not return to that house unless you are prepared for the truth she hides." "What truth?" Raphael demanded. Again the man shook his head. Some truths must come from the person who lives them. Raffaele stepped back, uncertain whether to trust this stranger. Yet Matteo's tone held sincerity. No mockery, no threat. Just a quiet, urgent warning. Matteo looked once toward the hidden house, then back at him. If you care for her, give her time, or at least caution. Before Raffaele could speak again, the distant sound of a bell rang through the night. Matteo turned, nodded respectfully, and withdrew into the darkness as though he had been swallowed by it. Raffaele stood alone, torn between suspicion and the strange sense that this man truly wished to protect Isabella. He remained there for several minutes until the city grew quiet again. Then he made his way slowly back to Palazzo Bardi, his mind heavy with questions. When he reached the palazzo gates, he dismissed the guard's curious glance and entered the silent halls. The lanterns glowed faintly, guiding him through corridors that felt suddenly unfamiliar. He removed the hood and straightened his clothing, though it did little to silence the storm in his thoughts. He walked toward his chambers, prepared to be alone with his doubts. But when he opened the door, he froze. Isabella sat in the center of the room. She wore a simple gown, her hair slipped from its elegant arrangement, as though she had not bothered to fix it after returning. The candlelight cast soft shadows across her face, but her expression held something sharper. "You are home late," she said quietly. Raphael swallowed hard. He forced a calm tone. "And you are awake late." She folded her hands in her lap, the gesture gentle but controlled. "I wish to speak with you." His heart tightened. "About what?" She hesitated only a moment. Then she lifted her eyes and met his directly. "I have the feeling that you saw something tonight." He felt the blood rush in his ears. He kept his voice steady. "What makes you think that?" She looked at him with a fragile steadiness, as though afraid the wrong word might break what remained between them. "Because I saw someone in the street. And for a moment, I thought it might be you." Raphael held his breath, unsure how to respond. But Isabella continued, her voice quieter now. "And I prayed it was not. Because if you had seen where I went, if you had seen what I did, I fear you would misunderstand me." Raffaele's chest tightened. He took one step closer. "Isabella, what burden are you carrying?" Her eyes glistened, but she held her composure. "One day I may tell you. But tonight, I cannot." He searched her face, wanting to reach for her, wanting to demand the truth, wanting to protect her from whatever shadow she walked toward. But she rose before he could speak. "I will retire," she murmured, moving toward the adjoining door. Raphael whispered her name, but she paused only briefly. She did not turn. Only one soft sentence escaped her lips, too quiet for anyone else to hear. "I hope you never learn what I have done." And then she stepped into her chamber, closing the door behind her, just as someone outside the window whispered his name through the darkness. Raphael spun toward the window, heart pounding. The whisper had been soft, almost carried by the night. He stepped closer, but when he opened the shutters just enough to look out, the courtyard below was empty. The lantern by the archway flickered, its light trembling across the stones, but no figure stood beneath it. He whispered sharply into the dark, "Who is there?" Silence answered him. He leaned farther out, searching every shadow. Nothing moved. No footsteps faded in the distance. No voice returned his call. Only the soft breeze swept across the courtyard, stirring the ivy along the walls. He waited several moments more before closing the shutters again. Whoever had spoken had vanished with unnerving speed. He stepped away from the window, troubled by the mystery and by Isabella's earlier words. He wanted to knock on her door to confront the secret between them, but he knew she would not reveal it tonight. Her tone had been too fragile, too guarded. Instead, he lay awake, staring at the dark ceiling until dawn touched the sky. The next morning the palazzo felt unusually still. Servants moved with quiet efficiency. Breakfast was prepared with the same precision as always, but the air felt heavier, as though something unspoken lingered in the halls. Raffaele dressed quickly and went to the terrace, where Isabella often took her morning tea. Today she was already there, sitting with her hands wrapped around a cup that had gone cold. She did not turn when he approached. "Good morning," he said gently. She nodded faintly. "Raphael." He studied her profile. The faint shadows beneath her eyes confirmed she had not slept either. He moved closer, lowering his voice. "Did you rest at all?" "A little," she murmured, though the tremor in her voice betrayed her. "Isabella," he said quietly, "I need to know what troubles you." She finally looked at him. Her gaze was guarded, but not cold. It held a worry too deep to hide. She hesitated before answering, as if weighing every word. "There are matters I cannot discuss yet." He felt his patience falter. "Yet you say you fear I would misunderstand." She lowered her eyes, guilt crossing her features. "I do not wish to bring you into a situation that may cause you distress." "Distress?" he repeated softly. "Isabella, your secrecy is distress." Her lips parted slightly, but no answer came. The pause between them stretched until he finally sighed and stepped back. If she would not speak at home, then he would seek answers elsewhere. The night's whisper still haunted him. Someone knew his name. Someone had followed him. Someone watched him. After a strained silence, Isabella stood, excused herself, and left the terrace without further explanation. He watched her go, torn between anger and concern. He could not endure the uncertainty much longer. By late afternoon, curiosity overcame restraint. When Isabella disappeared again behind the library's tall doors, he left the palazzo, slipping once more into the plain garments he had worn the night before. He kept his hood low and walked through Florence with swift, controlled steps. He reached the artisan quarter just as the sun dipped behind the roofs. The narrow streets glowed with evening lanterns. The house he had seen the night before stood unchanged, discreet and silent among the others. He moved cautiously, listening for noise, scanning the windows. He saw no sign of anyone inside. Slowly, he approached the door and touched the handle. It gave way with a faint creak, as though the house itself breathed quietly. He stepped inside. The room was dim, but the fading daylight revealed the small table, the single chair, and the wooden chest he had glimpsed through the shutters. He shut the door behind him. The house felt lived in, lightly, cautiously, without vanity. There were no decorations, no evidence of comfort, only necessity. The air carried the faint scent of old parchment and worn wood. Raphael approached the chest, hesitating before kneeling beside it. He touched the lid, feeling the rough grain beneath his fingers. This was where she had knelt. This was where she had whispered names he did not recognize. This was where she had hidden fear. He opened the chest. Inside were bundles of papers tied with cord. Some appeared old, others newer, all marked with seals or symbols he did not recognize. He lifted the first bundle. The papers contained lists of names, dates, and short notes written in Isabella's hand. Some names were crossed out. Some had a mark beside them. He murmured softly to himself, "What is all this?" He turned page after page, reading fragments of information without context. Missing individuals, relocated families, unexplained dismissals. Every note hinted at something troubling, but nothing formed a clear picture. He opened another bundle containing letters addressed to no one. Some spoke of grievances, others described disputes unresolved by local officials. Raphael felt tension not inside him. Why would Isabella involve herself in these matters? He put the letters back carefully and searched for the hidden drawer he had seen the night before. He pressed his hand against the floorboards until one shifted under his touch. Beneath it, he found the small drawer. Inside lay the sealed envelope. He lifted it. The seal was unbroken. The parchment was thick. The weight of it felt significant, as if it carried the truth he needed. He slipped it into his pocket, just as the door opened. Raphael stood abruptly, turning toward the sound. Isabella stood in the doorway. Her face drained of color. Her breath caught. The shock in her eyes cut straight through him. He had never seen her look so wounded, not even in arguments past. For a brief moment, neither spoke. The silence between them felt sharper than any accusation. "Raphael," she whispered, "how did you find this place?" He stepped forward, his voice low but steady. "I followed you last night. And I came again today because I cannot endure ignorance any longer." Her hand trembled on the doorframe. "You should not be here." "Should not?" he echoed. "Isabella, you come to a hidden house with documents concealed under floorboards. You leave the palazzo at night without explanation, and you refuse to speak to me. What am I supposed to do?" Her expression tightened, but sorrow overpowered the anger. "You are supposed to trust me." He felt the words as though someone had pressed a hand against his chest. Trust requires honesty. She stepped inside, closing the door behind her. Her movements were slow, careful, as though each step weighed more than the last. "You should have asked me," he answered softly. "And you should have told me." She lowered her gaze. She moved past him, kneeling beside the chest with shaking hands. She gathered the documents gently, almost protectively, as though afraid he would take them. "Please," she said, "do not look at these again." He crouched beside her. "Isabella, what are you hiding?" She shook her head. "I cannot speak of it." He touched her arm, voice trembling. "Are you in danger?" "No," she answered quickly, then hesitated. "Not precisely." "Then what is this? Why these names? Why these letters?" She pressed her lips together, her eyes glistening. "They are people who cannot speak for themselves." Raphael frowned. "What do you mean?" She closed her eyes as though the truth were too heavy to reveal. "Some have been displaced without warning. Others lost their positions unjustly. Some disappeared without formal record. I am trying to help them quietly, without causing you trouble." He stared at her, stunned by the confession. "Isabella," she shook her head again, "you must not involve yourself. This could compromise your standing. I intended to handle everything without drawing your name into it." He straightened, speaking firmly. "I am your husband. If you carry a burden, I share it." She looked up at him, startled by the certainty in his tone, but she did not answer. Before he could speak again, footsteps echoed outside the house. Isabella stiffened instantly. Raphael turned toward the door, senses sharpening. Someone approached, slow, purposeful steps that stopped directly outside. Isabella whispered urgently, "Hide the envelope." He did so without argument. The doorknob turned. The door creaked open, and Isabella walked toward the window, her breath unsteady as the shadow of someone stepped into the room. Matteo entered the room before either of them could speak. His presence felt different now, no longer the quiet figure who lingered in shadows, but someone walking with purpose, though still without threat. His gaze moved first to Isabella, then to Raffaele, settling on him with a calm recognition that made the air tighten. "I see you chose not to follow my advice," Matteo said quietly. Raffaele stepped slightly in front of Isabella, not out of aggression, but instinct. Advice that lacked clarity is difficult to follow. Matteo nodded once. True enough, but clarity is not always safe. Isabella rose quickly, one hand lifting in a pleading gesture. "Matteo, please. He should not have come. This is not what you think." Matteo raised his hands gently. "My intention is not to accuse the Count, nor to reprimand him, only to prevent misunderstandings before they take shape." Raphael frowned. "Then speak plainly." Isabella's voice trembled. "Please, Matteo, do not." But Matteo continued, his tone measured. "The Contessa has taken on responsibilities that require discretion, and discretion often invites suspicion, even from those who care for her. That is why I warned you." Raphael stepped closer. "If she is acting for the sake of justice, as she hints, then she should not bear it alone, nor should she fear my reaction." Isabella whispered, "You do not understand the consequences." "Then let me understand them," he replied softly. She looked at him, torn between relief and fear. Matteo watched them both with solemn patience before speaking again. "Your presence here complicates things, Count Bardi. If others knew you had set foot in this house, they would assume you share her involvement." Raphael answered immediately. "And what if I did?" Isabella gasped, her voice sharp. "Raffaele, do not say things without knowing the cost." He turned to her. "You think so little of my resolve? I think too highly of your safety," she whispered. Matteo stepped between them just enough to break the tension. "Whatever decisions you make must not be rushed. There are people watching movements they cannot explain. And you, Count, are not invisible, not even in disguise." Raphael stiffened. "Someone followed me last night. Someone whispered my name at the palazzo." Isabella's face paled at once. Matteo's expression tightened. Then he spoke with a softness that carried great weight. "That was not one of ours." Raphael exchanged a glance with Isabella. "Then who?" "Someone who has begun to suspect the Contessa's visits," Matteo replied. "Someone who stands to lose if her efforts succeed." Isabella pressed a hand to her chest, breath catching. They cannot know. They must not. Matteo shook his head. Not fully. But they sense something. And sensing is enough to stir trouble. Raphael felt a surge of protectiveness. You should have told me this. Isabella met his eyes with quiet pain. I wanted to protect you from uncertainties that might stain your reputation. He moved closer. And what of your safety? She looked down, unable to answer. Matteo interrupted gently. If you truly wish to understand, Count, you must let her speak in her own time. Not tonight. Not while eyes are searching these streets for answers. Raffaele clenched his hands. Then what should we do now? Matteo glanced toward the door. Leave, both of you, separately. The Contessa should return home first. You should wait at least half an hour before departing. And do not walk directly back to Palazzo Bardi. Take the long route. Isabella shook her head. He should not be involved. Raffaele turned sharply. I am already involved. Matteo raised a calming hand. Neither of you has the luxury of debate. Time is not your ally tonight. Isabella pressed her lips together, battling fear and the urgency of the moment. After a brief struggle, she nodded and moved toward the door. Before leaving, she placed a trembling hand on Raffaele's forearm. Please, she whispered, do nothing reckless. He covered her hand with his. You are asking something difficult. Her eyes softened. Then try. For both of us. She slipped out quietly, her footsteps fading down the street. Raphael waited until the silence returned, before turning to Matteo. You know more than you reveal. Matteo nodded. And I will reveal more when it becomes wise. Raffaele stepped toward him. You owe me more than cryptic warnings. I owe the Contessa my discretion, Matteo replied calmly. But I also owe you a truth you have not yet recognized. She has acted out of loyalty to you. Her secrecy is protection, not betrayal. Raphael felt the words settle deep inside him, unsettling and soothing at once. Protection from what? From those who twist justice into advantage, Matteo said, and from those who fear any voice that questions their comfort. Raffaele paced once across the small room. Then let me help her. Matteo shook his head. Not yet. If you push too soon, you will draw attention where subtlety is needed. Raffaele stopped pacing. And if danger grows? Then I will tell you everything, Matteo said, but only when the cost of silence becomes greater than the cost of truth. Raffaele stared at him for a long moment. Then his voice turned low. You assume I trust you. Matteo offered a weary smile. I assume only that you love your wife more than you value certainty. Raffaele exhaled slowly. Matteo was right. Infuriatingly right. The more he saw, the more he realized that his need to protect Isabella outweighed his desire for clarity. But that did not lessen his frustration. He approached the door, but paused before leaving. One last thing. Matteo looked up. You said someone suspects her. Someone followed me. Who might that be? Matteo's expression hardened, the first sign of sternness he had shown. Someone who does not fear bending rules for personal gain. Someone who watches from corners you do not see. Raffaele waited. Matteo hesitated before answering. A man who believes every noblewoman owes him her silence. A man who would not hesitate to question her honor if it served his ambitions. Raffaele's eyes narrowed. A name. Matteo shook his head. Not yet. Raphael stepped closer. Then give me something. Matteo whispered. He attends your gatherings. He smiles too easily. And he listens when no one notices. Raffaele felt his stomach tighten. That description could fit more than one man, but one face rose in his mind far faster than the others, a face he had overlooked for years. Matteo added, Go now, slowly, quietly, and do not let anyone see that you are troubled. Raphael nodded and slipped out into the street. He did not return directly home. He walked through narrow corridors, then along the banks of the river, then across another bridge, forcing himself to appear unhurried, even as his mind raced with questions. By the time he reached Palazzo Bardi, an hour had passed. He entered the courtyard quietly and climbed the stairs to the second floor, where faint light glowed from under the door of the private salon. He opened it gently. Isabella stood inside, her hands pressed against the window, her shoulders trembling with the weight of what she would not say. She did not turn, even when she sensed him. Raphael approached slowly. "Isabella," she whispered, "you should not have gone there." He stopped beside her. "Perhaps. But I had to see enough to understand you are not alone in this." She closed her eyes, overwhelmed. "You make it harder to protect you." He touched her hand gently. "And you make it impossible for me to walk away." Her breath caught, but before she could respond, a sharp knock sounded at the salon door. They turned simultaneously. Neither expected visitors at this hour. Isabella's fingers clenched around his sleeve. Raphael took a step forward, voice low. "Who knocks at a private room at night?" The knock came again, firmer this time, and a voice spoke through the door. "Count Bardi, forgive the intrusion. I must speak with you at once." Raphael exchanged a tense glance with Isabella before stepping toward the door. The voice belonged to Carlo Venturi, one of the city's administrative stewards. A man polite in public, smiling in every room, yet always watching more than he admitted. The memory of Matteo's warning pulsed through Raphael's mind as he reached for the handle. He opened the door only a fraction. Carlo stood in the corridor, hat in hand, posture perfectly respectful, yet his eyes glimmered with the alertness of someone who had already formed conclusions. "Forgive the hour," Carlo said with a courteous bow. "There are matters I must discuss with you, matters that cannot wait until morning." Raffaella kept his tone controlled. "If the matter is urgent, speak here." Carlo hesitated, glancing at Isabella in the background. "My lord, what I must say is not appropriate for all ears." Isabella stiffened, understanding all too clearly the insinuation. Raphael's jaw tightened. He opened the door wider and stepped out, closing it behind him so Isabella would not be subjected to Carlo's watchful stare. "Now, Carlo," he said quietly, "what concerns you at this hour?" Carlo leaned in, as though sharing confidential news. "There have been reports of suspicious activity in the artisan quarter. Certain individuals of status have been seen wandering there without explanation." Raphael held his breath, keeping his expression neutral. "And you come to me because?" Carlo smiled thinly. "Because I know you value the city's order, and because someone claimed to have seen a cloaked figure leaving that district last night, a figure whose height and posture resembled yours." Raphael maintained composure. "Many men share my height, perhaps," Carlo replied gently. "But not all share your stride." Raphael felt irritation rise in him, but he concealed it behind calm formality. "If you have an accusation, make it plainly." Carlo shook his head quickly. "No accusation, only concern. Concern that a man of your rank may be entangling himself in affairs that could be misinterpreted, and perhaps damaging." There was no mistaking the indirect threat. Raphael stepped closer, voice low. "Then allow me to ease your concern. I walked the riverbanks last night for air. Nothing more. No entanglements." Carlo studied him for a long moment, as though filtering truth from pretense. Finally he bowed slightly. "Of course, my lord. Forgive my intrusion. The city grows restless, and sometimes restlessness leads to shadows where none exist." Raphael answered, "Then let us not chase shadows without reason." Carlo smiled politely. "A wise thought. Good night, Count Bardi." He turned and walked away with composed elegance, though his eyes lingered a bit too long on the darkened corridor before he disappeared. Raphael re-entered the salon immediately. Isabella moved toward him with barely restrained urgency. What did he want? Raphael shut the door behind him. "He suspects too much. He asked if I had been in the artisan quarter." Her breath came sharp. "And what did you say?" I told him nothing of truth, but he watched me, and I fear he will continue to watch both of us. Isabella pressed a hand to her forehead. "This cannot continue. If Carlo has begun to suspect even a fragment of my movements—" Raffaele approached her. "Then explain them to me, all of them. Help me understand so that I may help you." She shook her head. "Not yet. Some matters are still too fragile." He took her hands gently. "Isabella, secrecy is no longer a shield. It is a danger. Matteo told me someone suspects your visits, someone who does not fear bending rules." Her eyes closed with anguish. "Matteo speaks too freely. I asked him to keep you out of this," he answered. "You cannot keep me out, not anymore." She opened her eyes, meeting his gaze with hesitation and longing. "You say that, but you do not know." You do not know who I am protecting." He froze. Protecting whom? She looked away. Someone who deserves better than the fate prepared for them. He released her hands only to steady her shoulders. "You must tell me more than riddles. I fear for you, Isabella." Her voice broke softly. "And I fear for the person I vowed to safeguard." Raphael lowered his tone. "Tell me who it is." But before she could speak, a servant knocked timidly from outside. "My lord, my lady, forgive me. There is a visitor waiting in the morning salon. He says the matter is delicate." Isabella stiffened immediately. "Who?" The servant hesitated. "He will not give his name." Raphael turned to Isabella. "Whoever it is, I will go." She shook her head. "No, Raphael. You cannot meet every shadow alone," he responded quietly. "Then let us meet it together." They walked through the corridor side by side, though their steps held different kinds of tension. When they reached the morning salon, the door stood slightly ajar. The visitor sat inside, cloak dark, hat resting on his lap, posture patient. When Raphael entered, the man stood. It was Matteo. Isabella exhaled with relief and worry mingled. "Matteo, why come here? You should not be seen." Matteo inclined his head toward her, then to Raffaele. "The situation has shifted." "I could not wait." Raffaele asked quietly. "What happened?" Matteo moved closer, keeping his voice low. "Someone has begun asking questions in places where questions should not be asked. Someone who knows how to disguise intent behind courtesy." "Carlo," Raffaele murmured. Matteo nodded faintly. "News travels. He lingered near the artisan quarter this evening. Too close to the house, too attentive." Isabella sank onto a chair. "We cannot let him find anything. If he suspects my involvement..." Raphael stood rigid, knowing the consequences of scandal among their class. Isabella's honor would be questioned before the truth even had a chance to breathe. Raffaele asked, "What must we do now?" Matteo's voice remained steady. "You must distance yourself from the house for now. Both of you. Let the place sit quiet for several days. Allow his curiosity to tire," Isabella whispered. "And the documents?" Matteo answered, "I already moved them." Raffaele looked up sharply. "Moved? Without telling us?" Matteo nodded. "I could not risk arriving when Carlo lingered nearby. I needed to act quickly." Isabella leaned forward. "Where are they now?" Matteo hesitated. "Somewhere safe, hidden where no official would think to look." Raffaele inhaled through tightened breath. "And the sealed envelope?" Matteo's eyes flicked toward Raffaele's coat, where the envelope rested unseen. "You have it, do you not?" Raffaele felt the weight of it against his chest. "Yes." Isabella looked between them. "Give it to me." Raffaele hesitated. "Isabella, please," she said, her voice desperate. "I must protect what remains." He placed the envelope into her hands. She held it delicately as though it were a living thing. Matteo gave a grave nod. "You must keep that close," Matteo warned softly. "If anyone finds it, they will twist its meaning." Raffaele asked, "What does it contain?" Isabella clutched it tighter. "Something dangerous, only if misunderstood." Raffaele's frustration rose. "Isabella, everything is dangerous when hidden. Allow me to stand with you." She looked at him with fear that softened into pleading. "I want to, I truly do, but if you stand beside me now, you may become a target." He stepped forward. "Then let me choose that risk." She took a shaky breath, shaken by his conviction. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Not yet." Matteo interjected quietly. "Count Bardi, the Contessa's reluctance is not mistrust. It is caution. She carries responsibility for more than her own safety." Isabella nodded, eyes shimmering. "I beg you, give me a little more time. When all is in order, you will know everything." Raphael felt the ache of distance between them, but he also saw the sincerity in her plea. After a moment, he nodded once. "Very well, but know this, I am not stepping away. Not anymore." Her eyes softened in a way he had not seen in months. Matteo exhaled in relief. "Good. Then the next days must be lived quietly. No visits to the artisan quarter, no unusual movements, nothing that may draw attention." Raffaele agreed. "And what of the man who suspects her?" Matteo's expression grew somber. Carlo Venturi will watch closely, but subtle men often reveal themselves too soon. Let him look, let him form theories, but give him nothing to confirm them. He stood, adjusting his cloak. I must leave before dawn. I will send word if the situation worsens. Isabella walked him to the door. Matteo paused before stepping out. He turned to Raphael. Take care, Count. Those who stand in comfortable rooms often fear those who move in quiet ones. Raphael nodded. And those who fear are dangerous, Matteo answered. Only when they imagine secrets where truth is hidden. He departed silently. Raffaele closed the door. Isabella remained still for several seconds, her grip on the envelope firm. Raffaele approached her slowly. Isabella, let me carry some of this weight. She swallowed hard. I will. Soon. I just need to secure one last matter. After that, everything will be clear. Before he could respond, the corridor door cracked open. A servant rushed in, breathless. My lady, a note arrived for you. Urgent. Delivered by no one we recognized. Isabella's face drained of color. Raphael took the note from the servant's trembling hand. The seal was unfamiliar. He handed it to Isabella carefully. She broke the seal, unfolded the paper, and read the single sentence inside, and her knees nearly gave way as she whispered the words aloud. Isabella stared at the note with trembling hands, her breath caught in her throat. The single sentence, written in tight, slanted lettering, seemed to drain the color from her face. Raffaele stepped forward at once, steadying her by the arm. What does it say? He asked quietly. Isabella tried to speak, but the words would not form. Her throat tightened, her chest rising and falling too quickly. Raffaele gently took the note from her hand, his voice soft yet urgent. Let me read it. She gave a faint nod. Raphael lifted the paper and read the message aloud. You are not as hidden as you believe. The sentence was simple, almost harmless in form, but its meaning struck like ice. Isabella pressed her hand over her mouth, shaken by the implication. Raffaele frowned, reading it again, searching for some mark, some signature, some clue. Nothing. Only the chilling anonymity. Isabella whispered, Someone knows. Someone is watching. Raphael set the note on the table. Who delivered this? The servant bowed nervously. A boy, my lord. He did not wait for a reply. Raphael dismissed him with a nod and turned back to Isabella. Whoever sent this wants to frighten you. She swallowed hard. And they succeeded. Raphael guided her to a chair, lowering his voice. You must tell me everything now. I cannot protect what I cannot understand. Isabella stared at the floor. Not yet. If I speak too soon, I risk revealing matters that are not mine alone. Raphael knelt beside her. Then tell me what you can. At least enough to know the shape of this danger. She hesitated, torn between fear and trust. After a long moment, she whispered, The people whose names I guard. They were not merely displaced. Some were removed from their positions abruptly without explanation. Others were ordered to leave the city entirely. Quiet commands, no record, no trial, all under the guise of administrative reform. Raphael's brow furrowed. And you believe the reforms were false? I know they were false, she said, voice shaking. These decisions did not come from the council. They came from individuals using their authority for their own gain, people losing their homes, their livelihoods, their voices, and no one to defend them. Raphael felt something twist sharply inside him. And so you took it upon yourself. Yes, she whispered. Their letters reached me. Their petitions were rejected elsewhere. Someone had to listen. Raffaele stood slowly, struggling to reconcile the woman before him with the scale of the risk she had taken. And the sealed envelope. She pressed it to her chest. It contains proof, enough to expose an entire chain of wrongdoing. Raphael exhaled in disbelief. Isabella, this is not a burden you should carry alone. She looked up at him, eyes shimmering. I feared bringing it to you. If anyone learned of my involvement, your name would fall beside mine. I cannot allow that. Raphael's voice softened. You still do not understand. Your burden is mine, whether you hide it or not. Before she could respond, a soft knock sounded at the door. They froze. The servant returned, bowing apologetically. My lord, another message has arrived. This one addressed to you. Raphael exchanged a startled glance with Isabella. "Bring it here," he said. The servant placed the folded note on the table and withdrew. Raphael picked it up. The wax seal was pressed with a pattern he recognized, a small, nearly invisible crest belonging to Carlo Venturi. Isabella whispered, "He knows." Raphael opened the letter quickly but carefully. The content was even briefer than hers. "Count Bardi, I would like to request a private conversation tomorrow concerning your recent interests." Raphael felt Isabella stiffen beside him. She reached for his sleeve, fear rising in her voice. "He cannot know. He cannot." "If he suspects you," Raphael interrupted gently. "Isabella, breathe. The note says nothing beyond implication." "Implication is enough," she whispered urgently. "Carlo thrives on implication. He can ruin reputations with nothing more than suggestion." Raphael stepped closer, lowering his tone. "Then let him try. I will give him nothing." Isabella shook her head. "You do not understand him. He is subtle. He knows how to entangle others in his suspicions." Raphael asked, "Then what does he gain from this?" She hesitated. "Control, influence, fear. If he can claim to uncover a noblewoman's secret, he gains leverage. And if that secret touches on government matters," Raphael finished quietly, "then he gains power." She nodded, her hands trembling. He took the letter and crumpled it tightly in his palm. "Tomorrow I will meet him, but I will not speak of you, or the documents, or the house." Isabella looked stricken. "You must be careful. If he senses you are hiding something, he will sense only what I choose to show him." She stood and walked to the window, the envelope still clutched close. The night sky stretched beyond the courtyard, quiet yet heavy with uncertainty. Raphael joined her. He spoke softly. "Tell me something, Isabella. When you began helping these people, did you ever imagine it would come to this?" She closed her eyes. "No. I believed I could do it quietly, without drawing attention, without involving anyone." Raphael touched her shoulder gently. "You were wrong about that, and now you have me involved whether you will admit it or not." A fragile smile flickered on her lips, but fear quickly replaced it. "Raphael, if Carlo confronts you, do not speak of Matteo." "I will not. Nor of the house. Never. Nor of the envelope." Raphael nodded. Not a word. Isabella exhaled shakily, leaning against the window frame. Behind them the candlelight flickered, casting soft shadows across the room. A knock sounded again. This time it was firm, intentional. Raphael's spine straightened. Isabella whispered, "Who is that?" He motioned for silence and approached the door. He placed his hand on the handle, listening. The hallway beyond was quiet. No servant announced themselves. He opened the door a small inch. No one stood there. Not a soul. The corridor was empty. A chill passed through him. Isabella approached slowly. "What is it?" He pointed to the floor. A single folded paper lay at the threshold. Raphael stared at it, unsure whether to pick it up. Isabella swallowed hard. "Please, read it." He knelt, lifted the paper and unfolded it. Inside was a single line written in the same slanted hand as the note Isabella had received. "If you meet him tomorrow, you will regret it." Isabella pressed both hands over her mouth, and Raphael looked up sharply as a faint creak echoed somewhere down the hall, as though someone unseen had just taken a step in retreat. Raphael rose at once, the warning note still in his hand. Isabella stood behind him, breath shallow, eyes fixed on the dark corridor. The soft creak that had echoed moments before faded into silence, but the air remained charged with a presence neither could see. He stepped into the hallway without hesitation. Isabella tried to follow, but he raised a hand gently. "Stay inside, please." She stopped, fear pressing into her voice. "Do not go far." "I won't," he promised. He walked down the corridor slowly, every step deliberate. The lanterns flickered along the walls, casting uneven patterns that shifted with the slightest draft. He reached the end of the hallway and turned the corner. Empty. No footsteps. No fleeing figure. Just the stillness of the upper floor at night. He whispered to the shadows, "If you wish to confront me, do it openly." No answer came. When he returned to the room, Isabella stood where he had left her, hands clasped tightly before her. She closed the door quickly once he entered. "No one?" she asked. "No one," he replied. But the message was deliberate. Someone wants to frighten us or control our choices. Isabella sank into the nearest chair, head bowed. "Then you cannot meet Carlo tomorrow." Raffaele disagreed instantly. "That is exactly why I must meet him." She lifted her head sharply. "Raphael, you do not understand. Carlo is not merely curious. He is calculating. If he senses you are troubled, he will dig." Raphael stepped closer. "If I avoid him, he will assume I have something to hide." "You do," she whispered softly. He exhaled. "Something hidden is not the same as something shameful." Isabella rose, pacing the room in small circles. "You do not know the way he works. He uses rumor like a net. One whisper becomes a chain of suspicions until a reputation collapses. If he believes you have reason to avoid him, he will tighten that net around you, around us." Raphael watched her carefully. "Then tell me what he suspects. Tell me enough that I may defend us." She shook her head helplessly. "If I tell you too soon, others may be implicated. I am not the only one gathering information. I am not the only one at risk." Raphael took her by the hands. "Isabella, look at me. You are not alone anymore. Whether you will it or not, I am here. I will stay." Her eyes glistened. "You think your presence comforts me, but it terrifies me, because now any blow meant for me will strike you. Then let it strike both of us," he said quietly. "I will not let it strike you alone." She closed her eyes, overwhelmed. Before either could speak more, the door opened without warning. A servant entered, startled by their tense expressions. "Forgive me, my lord. I did not mean to interrupt." Raffaele composed himself. "What is it?" "A guest has arrived unexpectedly." "Signor Venturi." Isabella's knees weakened, and she grasped the back of the chair for support. Raffaele frowned. "Carlo? Now?" "Yes, my lord. He insists on a brief discussion, even at this hour." Isabella whispered. No, Raffaele, do not meet him tonight." Raffaele asked the servant, "Where is he waiting?" "In the small receiving room, my lord." Raphael turned back to Isabella. "You should go to your chamber. I will handle this." She shook her head. "What will you say?" "Whatever is necessary." Her fear sharpened. "Raphael, you cannot show him you are unsettled." He kissed her hand lightly. "I will not." As he walked toward the door, Isabella caught his sleeve one last time. "Please, be careful." He nodded, then stepped out. The corridor to the receiving room felt longer than usual. The lanterns cast long shadows, and his mind raced through possibilities. Carlo visiting at night was not merely unusual. It was strategic, a tactic to catch someone off guard. When he entered the small room, Carlo rose from his seat with a practiced smile. "My lord," he greeted warmly, "I hope the hour does not offend you." "Not at all," Raffaele replied evenly. "What brings you here?" Carlo adjusted his sleeves before speaking, as though arranging his words with the same care. "I simply wish to clarify the note I sent earlier. Matters involving your recent walks." Raphael kept his expression neutral. "I walked to clear my mind. Nothing more." Carlo nodded slowly. "And did your walk take you anywhere near the artisan quarter, perhaps?" Raphael felt a flicker of anger, but held it steady beneath his calm voice. "Why would it?" Carlo gave a delicate shrug. "I merely ask because several residents mentioned seeing a man dressed plainly, yet walking with the posture of someone accustomed to authority. You understand how such details might draw attention." Raffaella's gaze hardened subtly. "If you rely on posture to identify men, Carlo, you must have an impressive eye." Carlo chuckled lightly. "I observe details others overlook. It is both gift and curse." Raphael leaned slightly forward. "Then observe this. I will not tolerate insinuations without grounds. If you have a question, ask it plainly." Carlo's smile widened by a hint. "Very well. Do you know anything about unauthorized gatherings in that district? Individuals exchanging documents, perhaps? Or nobles acting discreetly?" Raphael's heartbeat tightened, but his voice remained steady. "I know that Florence is filled with rumors, most of them meaningless." Carlo studied him, searching for any crack in composure. Raphael offered none. Carlo finally stood. "Forgive me, Count Bardi. I simply wish to preserve the reputation of those I serve alongside." Misunderstandings can ruin even the most honorable families. Raphael answered, "Then let us avoid misunderstandings altogether. You have my word. I am not involved in anything improper." Carlo bowed, though his eyes betrayed skepticism. "Of course, my lord." He turned toward the door but paused. "You know, it is curious. People sometimes hide the truth not out of guilt, but out of fear. Fear can make even the innocent act suspiciously," Raffaella replied quietly. "And those who provoke fear often hope to expose what does not exist." Carlo's smile tightened. "We shall see. Good night, Count." When Carlo left, Raphael exhaled a slow breath. The conversation had been a test. Carlo had left with fewer answers than he desired, but his curiosity remained sharp. Raphael returned to the private salon. Isabella rushed to him the moment he closed the door. "What did he ask? What did you say?" He recounted the conversation succinctly. Isabella listened with widening eyes, gripping the edge of the table until her knuckles paled. "He knows," she whispered. "He knows someone is acting behind the scenes. And he suspects us." Raphael approached her, voice firm. "Then we must stay ahead of him." She shook her head. "No. You must step away before he draws you deeper into his suspicions." Raphael answered, "I will not." Isabella pressed her hands to her temples. "Raffaele, everything is collapsing. I cannot let him turn his gaze fully on you. I need time. I need to secure the last of the names. I need—" She broke off abruptly. Raphael stepped closer. "Isabella?" She lifted her eyes, full of desperation. "There is someone I promise to protect above all others. Someone who cannot be exposed. Someone who would be ruined." Raphael's voice softened. "Who is it?" She looked at him, torn between truth and self-defense. "Raffaele, if I tell you, you will be forced to choose between loyalty and safety, and I choose loyalty. But you do not know the cost. Then tell me the cost." She shook her head violently. I cannot trap you in this." He caught her trembling hands. "Isabella, you are already trapped, and I am already at your side." She closed her eyes, tears pressing behind her lashes. "Raffaele." Before she could speak more, someone knocked loudly at the main door of the palazzo. Both froze. A servant rushed in breathlessly. "My lord, my lady, there is a visitor demanding to speak with you. He refuses to give his name, but he says it concerns the Contessa's recent activities." Raphael and Isabella exchanged one stunned glance, both struck by the same thought. No unexpected visitor asking for the Contessa at such an hour could bring anything but trouble. Isabella's breath quickened and she grasped Raphael's sleeve. "Do not let me face this alone," she whispered. "You will not," he answered. They walked together through the corridor, their steps too quick to hide the urgency pressing in around them. Servants along the way glanced up in surprise at the sight of their anxious hosts, but no one dared speak a word. The tension was too sharp, too strange to approach. When they reached the grand entrance hall, the front doors were shut, and a lone servant waited near them, shifting nervously. "Where is the visitor?" Raphael asked. "Just outside, my lord. He refused to enter unless granted permission directly by you." Isabella's fingers tightened on the folds of her gown. Raphael set a hand on her arm. "Whatever happens," he murmured, "do not speak unless you wish to." She nodded faintly. Raphael motioned for the servant to open the door. The wooden panels swung inward with a heavy groan, revealing a dim figure standing under the courtyard lantern. The man was slender, cloaked, his hat low enough to shadow his face. He kept his hands visible, not out of courtesy but to show he carried nothing that could be mistaken as a threat. Still, his presence carried weight. "Good evening, Count Bardi," the man said calmly. "And good evening to you, Contessa." Isabella's breath caught at the sound of his voice. She recognized it. Raphael looked sharply at her. "You know him?" She did not answer. The man stepped closer, stopping at the threshold. "I apologize for the hour, but what I must say cannot wait." Raffaele's tone deepened. "Then say it." The man lifted his face just enough for the lantern light to reveal him. It was Matteo. Raffaele exhaled in disbelief. "Matteo, you said you would not return tonight." Isabella moved forward. "Has something happened?" Matteo bowed his head gravely. "Yes. Something has changed, and you must hear it now." Raffaele motioned him inside. Matteo entered, his cloak dripping faint traces of night mist. Once the door closed, Matteo looked around the hall, ensuring no additional ears lingered nearby. He turned to Isabella first. "My lady, your absence from the house today did not go unnoticed." Her face tightened. "Carlo went there." Matteo nodded. "Not inside, but near enough, too near. He questioned residents. He asked about you." Raphael's jaw clenched. "And what did they say?" "Nothing," Matteo assured quickly. "They know better than to speak to someone like him. But he is determined. And tonight," he returned. Isabella pressed a hand over her chest. "Returned? Why?" Matteo spoke slowly. "Because he believes he is close to uncovering something, and he will not stop until he has something or someone to accuse." Raphael stepped closer, voice low. "Then tell me what we must do to stop him." Matteo hesitated, glancing between them. "What I tell you now is for your ears alone. No one else, not even the servants." Raphael motioned toward the small side parlor, a room less open, more intimate. They entered together. Matteo remained standing. He began quietly. "The people whose names the Contessa protects, they were not simply displaced or dismissed. Some were targeted." Isabella's breath trembled. "Matteo, you must allow me to speak," he insisted gently. He looked at Raphael. The corruption she uncovered was not merely unfairness. It was orchestrated, a deliberate effort to silence those who questioned the misuse of administrative funds. Carlo was involved, not at the top, but close enough to benefit. Raffaele's blood ran cold, and Isabella discovered this. "Not intentionally," Matteo replied. "Her charitable work brought letters to her attention. When she visited families, she saw patterns. She followed those patterns to documents, and those documents revealed more than she expected." Isabella spoke softly, barely audible. "I did not realize the danger at first. I believed it was simple injustice. I only meant to help them quietly." Matteo nodded. "And that secrecy is what kept you safe. Until now." Raffaele turned sharply. "Then why reveal all this to me now?" "Because," Matteo said, his voice tightening, "someone else discovered the existence of a hidden witness." Raphael felt his heart seize. "Witness?" Matteo looked at Isabella with sorrow. "The person you vowed to protect, the one who saw too much. They are no longer safe." Isabella's hand flew to her mouth. "No." "Who found out?" Matteo answered solemnly. "Carlo, or someone working for him. And that is why the warning notes were sent to you both. Not to silence you, to intimidate you, to make you retreat." Raphael asked, "Can he expose Isabella?" "Not yet," Matteo said. "He knows someone interferes, but he seeks proof. Proof he believes he can force from the witness," Isabella whispered, trembling. "He must not find them. He must never discover who it is." Raffaele looked at her sharply. "Isabella, you must tell me who you protect." Her lips parted, but Matteo stepped in quickly. "No, my lord. Not yet. Knowing their name will not help, and it may endanger them further. What matters now is that Carlo is searching. If he finds even a hint of the witness's identity, he will use it to dismantle everything." Raphael paced the room, tension vibrating through his steps. "Then what do you propose?" Matteo spoke calmly, though urgency simmered beneath. "You must distance yourself publicly from anything unusual. Live as though nothing troubles you. Do not seek information. Do not visit certain quarters. And above all, do not meet with Carlo again privately." Isabella looked at Raffaele. "Did you tell him about the meeting tomorrow?" Raffaele shook his head. "No." But he pushed. "He wants more than conversation." Matteo responded grimly. Then he must not have it. Isabella sank onto the small sofa. Matteo stepped closer, lowering his voice. "There is something else you must know. The warnings you received, the notes, they may not come from the same person." Raffaele stopped pacing. "What do you mean?" "One appeared meant to protect," Matteo explained. "The other to intimidate. The handwriting looked similar at first glance, but the stroke pressure was different. They are not the same." Isabella's voice trembled. "So someone is helping us?" Matteo nodded faintly. "Yes, someone who knows far too much about Carlo's intentions." Raphael frowned. "And you do not know who?" "No, but they want to keep distance. They hide even from me. Raphael exhaled. The situation grows more twisted by the hour. Isabella buried her face in her hands. I wanted to spare you all of this. Raphael knelt before her. You are my wife. I stand where you stand. A soft, almost aching sound escaped her, half relief, half fear. Matteo gave a quiet nod of approval. Then you must stand with her by acting as though nothing is amiss. Carlo thrives on visible tension. Any sign of distress will be used to his advantage. Raphael responded steadily. Then he will see none from us. Isabella looked at him with gratitude that shook her composure. And for the first time that night, something in the room felt less heavy, but only for a moment. Because as they prepared to rise, a new sound rippled through the air. A quick, urgent knock at the front door. Not soft, not timid, a rapid, insistent beating. Raphael froze. Matteo's eyes sharpened. Isabella stared toward the hall, terror widening her gaze. The servant shouted down the corridor, "My lord, someone demands entry. He says he must speak with the Contessa, immediately." Raphael did not move at first. The urgent knocking echoed through the entrance hall again, louder this time, but he kept his eyes fixed on Isabella, who stood trembling near the parlor door. Matteo stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I will see who it is." Raffaele stopped him. "No. If the visitor sees you here, he will ask questions we cannot answer. I will speak to him myself." Matteo hesitated, then nodded and retreated into the shadows of the parlor. Isabella touched Raffaele's sleeve, her voice barely a breath. "Please, be careful, always," he promised. He walked to the entry hall with calm, measured steps, though his heartbeat quickened. The servant stood frozen beside the door, unsure whether to open it again. Raphael took the handle. "I will speak to the visitor. Remain at a distance." The servant bowed and retreated. Raphael opened the heavy door. A thin, elderly man stood outside. His cloak was worn, his hat tucked respectfully beneath his arm. His face was lined by years, not malice. The lantern above him cast a warm glow over his weary features. "Good evening, my lord," the man said, bowing deeply. "Forgive the hour. I come on behalf of someone who cannot come here themselves." Raffaele's shoulders eased slightly. "Whom do you represent?" The man glanced around nervously, lowering his tone. "Someone the Contessa has helped, someone who wishes to repay that kindness." Raffaele's breath caught. "You know of her work?" The man nodded. "Yes, and though many do not dare speak of it, some of us know exactly what she has risked." Raphael stepped aside. "Come inside. Speak without fear." The man bowed again and entered, removing his cloak respectfully. Isabella appeared in the hall a moment later, keeping close to Raffaele's side. "Madonna Isabella," the man said softly, bowing again. "It is an honor to meet you properly. I know you do not know my name, but my family knows yours, more than you realize." Isabella offered him a gentle nod. "Sir, please, tell us why you have come." The man took a steadying breath. "A rumor spreads tonight, dangerous and untrue. They say the Contessa has been meeting someone in secret, someone of improper reputation. That she—" he shook his head, ashamed even to speak it. "That she hides more than charity, that her movements at night are not for others." Isabella placed a hand on her chest, stunned. Who would say such lies? The man lifted his tired eyes. "Someone who wishes to silence you. Someone who wishes to ruin you before the truth can be spoken. Forgive my bluntness. But this gossip, this poison, will reach Carlo Venturi by morning, if it has not already." Raphael felt the air shift inside his chest. "So this is his strategy." The old man nodded slowly. "If he cannot accuse you of interfering in matters of justice, he will accuse you of impropriety instead. An easier scandal to spread, one that needs no proof," Isabella whispered, devastated. "I feared he would go after my reputation, but not so quickly." Raphael held her hand firmly. "We will not allow slander to spread." The man raised a gentle hand. "I did not come to bring only warning. I came to bring protection." "A message from the person you shield." Isabella's breath caught. "They sent you." "Yes, they said you would refuse to abandon your efforts unless you knew they were safe. They asked me to reassure you of this. They have left Florence for now, quietly, under a trusted name. Carlo will not find them. Isabella pressed her hand to her mouth, relief flooding her features. They are safe, safe enough, the man promised. Until this storm settles. Raphael asked quickly, did anyone see them leave? No. Their departure was arranged discreetly. Only a handful knew. And I made certain no trace points back to you. Isabella nodded, more grateful than words could express. Thank you. Truly. The man bowed deeply. It is we who thank you, my lady. What you have done. Few nobles would risk so much for so many. Raphael stepped closer, extending his hand. You have helped us tonight more than you realize. The man shook his hand with quiet humility. I should not stay long. The streets are watched. Even moving through the city has become an art of caution. Isabella asked softly, is there anything more we must know? Just one thing, he said. Someone in this city works in your favor. Quietly. Someone who sees more than you think. Someone who sent a message tonight before I came. I do not know who, but they wish for your safety as fiercely as we do. Raphael exchanged a glance with Isabella. The conflicting notes. The warnings. Two voices in the dark. Isabella took a slow breath. We will remain alert and cautious. The man stepped back, bowing once more. May courage stay with you, my lord and lady. Many depend on it. He left quietly, disappearing into the night. When the door closed, the hall fell into a heavy, thoughtful silence. Matteo emerged from the parlor, his expression calmer than before. So, he said, the witness is safe. Isabella nodded shakily. Yes, for now. Matteo stepped closer. Then the worst threat to you is not exposure of the truth, but the lies Carlo will craft. Raphael agreed. He knows nothing certain, so he will invent what suits him. Matteo's voice remained steady. Then we must prevent him from finding an audience. If he spreads rumor, we must remain above suspicion. Isabella lowered her eyes. And how do we manage that? Raphael answered with quiet certainty. Together. By living tomorrow as though nothing stands between us, as though nothing ever has. Isabella looked at him, startled by the depth in his voice. But her expression softened, warmed, even steadied by the way he spoke. Raphael continued. We will not hide in corners. We will not whisper. We will appear in public together. We will show unity, confidence, and peace. If Carlo brings any accusation, it will crumble against the image he sees. Matteo nodded. That is wise. A united front destroys suspicion. Isabella exhaled slowly. And what of the envelope? The documents? Raffaele looked to Matteo. Hide them where even shadows cannot imagine. Matteo bowed his head once. I know the place. Isabella stepped forward, hands clasped. Matteo, you have done so much already. He gave a faint smile. I serve justice, not favors, and your courage, my lady, deserves an ally. Raphael placed a hand on Isabella's back gently. We rest tonight. We rise tomorrow with clarity. No fear, no secrecy, only truth between us. Isabella looked up at him, her eyes shining with something tender and unguarded, something that had been waiting to surface beneath weeks of worry. I want that, she whispered. I want everything clear between us again. Raphael took her hands in his, holding them with calm sincerity. Then we begin now. No more distance, no more silence. We face whatever comes, together. The words settled over her like warmth after a long winter. Her breath steadied. The trembling eased from her hands. Matteo stepped back, allowing them a moment of quiet. His voice softened. I will return when it is safe to share more. Until then, trust each other. It is your strongest defense. He left the room silently, disappearing down the hall. Isabella turned to Raffaele, voice barely above a whisper. I feared so much. But tonight, I finally feel hope again. He lifted her hand to his lips. We will build on that hope, not with secrets, with truth. She nodded, tears gathering but not falling. Relief and affection stirred between them, beginning to mend wounds neither had fully understood until now. They walked together through the palazzo's quiet corridors, breathing more freely than they had in days. The storm had not passed, but the path forward was no longer blurred. It was shared. Inside her chamber doorway, Isabella hesitated only a moment before speaking softly, almost shyly. Raffaele, stay with me a little longer tonight. He stepped closer, brushing her cheek gently with his thumb. Always. They entered the chamber side by side, the distance between them finally dissolving into closeness, trust, and quiet relief. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. But tonight, they rested in unity, warmed by the certainty that they faced the world not as two guarded strangers, but as husband and wife returning to one another. And for the first time in many nights, Isabella slept without fear. Raffaele watched over her until dawn began to rise, certain of only one thing. Whatever truth tomorrow revealed, they would meet it as one. Raffaele woke before dawn, though he had barely slept. Isabella rested beside him, her breathing soft and steady, her face finally free of the strain that had haunted her for weeks. He watched her for a long moment, letting the quiet fill him with a peace he had forgotten he needed. When she stirred, her eyes opened slowly, meeting his with a sleepy tenderness he had not seen since their earliest days together. She blinked once, twice, then whispered his name, as though testing the sound of it. Raffaele. He brushed a loose strand of hair from her face. "Good morning, Isabella." A faint smile touched her lips. "It feels strange to wake without fear." He leaned closer. "Then, let this be the first morning of many." She reached for his hand. "I want that, more than anything." He kissed her forehead, and she closed her eyes briefly, absorbing the comfort of it. When she looked back at him, her gaze held something deeper than gratitude, something warm, hopeful, and unguarded. For the first time, she said, "I feel I can breathe again." And for the first time, he replied softly, "I feel you are breathing with me." They remained like that for a moment longer, holding hands in the stillness of dawn, until distant sounds from the courtyard reminded them that the day awaited them, along with whatever consequences Carlo's schemes had set into motion. Isabella sat up slowly. "Raffaele, whatever happens today, I want to face it beside you." "And you will," he said. "We face all of it together now." She nodded, then rose to prepare for the morning. When they dressed, their movements held a new harmony. No hidden glances, no unspoken doubts. Every gesture felt intentional, shared, solid. When they met again in the grand hall, the sun was rising over Florence, casting soft light through the tall windows. The palazzo felt different this morning, not oppressive, not heavy with secrets. It felt like a home beginning to breathe again. Isabella approached Raffaele with a steady confidence. "Are you ready?" "More than ever," he replied. They walked arm in arm to the central receiving hall, where the household waited for morning instructions. Servants paused upon seeing them enter together so closely, the Contessa leaning gently into the Count's side. Their unity was unmistakable, their bond undeniable. Raffaele addressed the staff calmly. "Today, the Contessa and I will attend a gathering at the Palazzo Ricci. Prepare the carriage." A few maids exchanged surprised glances. Isabella had withdrawn from public events for weeks. Now she stood brighter than they had seen in months, her chin lifted, her posture graceful but strong. After the servants dispersed, Isabella whispered to him, "Thank you. Being seen together, it matters more than you know." Raphael touched her hand. "Then let us make ourselves seen everywhere." They boarded the carriage with quiet anticipation. The streets of Florence were already lively when they arrived at Palazzo Ricci. Nobles mingled outside the grand steps, exchanging morning pleasantries and scanning new arrivals, with the usual mixture of curiosity and calculation. When Raphael helped Isabella down from the carriage, conversations faltered. People noticed immediately their closeness, their poise, their serenity. Isabella leaned in just slightly toward her husband and whispered, "They are staring." "Let them," he murmured back. A few nobles approached them. "Count Bardi," one greeted warmly. "And Contessa Bardi, how lovely to see you again. It has been too long," Isabella answered with poise. "I was unwell, but I am quite recovered now." The noblewoman smiled politely, though her eyes flicked curiously between husband and wife. Raphael recognized the curiosity and welcomed it. Another couple joined, offering cordial greetings. Isabella answered each with composed warmth. She was steady, elegant, untouchable. Raphael felt pride swell in his chest. But as they stepped into the grand hall of Palazzo Ricci, Carlo Venturi appeared near the far window, speaking with two councilmen. The moment he saw Raffaella and Isabella together, his expression sharpened. Isabella tensed, but Raffaele covered her hand with his. "Stay close." She nodded faintly. Carlo excused himself from the councilman and approached them at once, wearing a courteous smile that never reached his calculating eyes. "Count Bardi, Contessa," he greeted warmly. "What a pleasant surprise to find you both here this morning." Raffaele returned the smallest of bows. "Good morning, Carlo." Isabella kept her gaze steady. "Signor Venturi." Carlo studied them for a long moment, searching for cracks. He found none. Their unity was too complete, too obvious to misinterpret. "I had hoped to speak with you today," Carlo began lightly, "about a few matters circulating in the city, rumors mostly." Raphael answered before Isabella could react. "Rumors tend to arise when people invent shadows for the sake of excitement. I ignore them." Carlo's smile thinned slightly, a wise approach. Yet some shadows can be persuasive, if left unaddressed. Isabella tilted her head calmly. "And which shadows concern you today, Signor Venturi?" Carlo offered a small, rehearsed laugh. "Oh, nothing serious. Only speculation about late-night movements in certain quarters. Nothing that touches anyone of importance." Raphael stepped closer, his tone perfectly polite. "Then I trust you will continue treating such matters as trivial." Carlo held his gaze, but Raphael did not blink. After several tense seconds, Carlo inclined his head slightly, a silent acknowledgement that he had found no weakness to exploit. He turned to Isabella. "I trust you remain in good health." She smiled serenely, resting her hand lightly on Raphael's arm. "Perfect health, especially now that my husband and I have found more time together." Carlo's eyes flicked to Raphael's hand covering hers. A realization dawned there, one that unsettled him. Whatever he had suspected, whatever rumor he had hoped to attach to Isabella, the sight before him crushed it completely. "Your unity is admirable," Carlo finally said. Raphael answered calmly, "It is unbreakable." Carlo inclined his head politely, but frustration rippled subtly across his expression. He excused himself with a forced smile and disappeared into the crowd. Isabella exhaled softly. "He will speak of this." "He will," Raphael agreed. "And he will say, 'We are strong, together, nothing more.'" She smiled, relief softening her entire face. The rest of the gathering unfolded easily. They spoke with long-neglected acquaintances, shared gentle conversation, and walked side by side through the hall as though rediscovering a rhythm they had once lived in effortlessly. By late afternoon, the weight of suspicion around Isabella had shifted. Rumor struggled when faced with undeniable truth, and the truth today was simple. The Count and Contessa were united, confident, and entirely at peace with one another. When they returned home, Isabella stopped him by the grand staircase. "Raffaele, I have something to give you." He searched her face, reading the hesitation beneath her gentle tone. "What is it?" She reached into the small embroidered satchel at her waist and pulled out the sealed envelope she had kept hidden for so long. He stared. "Isabella, you should keep that safe." "I am safe," she said softly, "not because the danger has passed, but because I am no longer alone inside it. This belongs to both of us now." He took the envelope slowly, moved by the trust in her eyes. "Are you certain?" She nodded. "Yes. No more secrets. Not between us." He placed a hand over hers and whispered, "Thank you." Her eyes glowed with warmth. "Do you want to read it now?" "Not yet," he said gently. "I want something else first." She raised her eyebrows. "And what is that?" He stepped closer, the courage to speak what I should have spoken long ago. She held her breath. Raphael continued quietly, "Isabella, I have loved you for years, but I realize now that love is not enough if it is not shown, if it is not spoken, if it is not lived every day. I failed to see your heart fully before. I failed to give you the safety you needed to speak, but I see you now, and I want to spend the rest of my life proving that my heart belongs to you completely." Her eyes filled instantly, her voice trembling. "Raphael, I thought you had grown distant. I thought I had lost you." "Never," he said, "and never again." She touched his cheek with trembling fingers. "Then let me say what I have held back far too long. You are the only man I have ever loved. The only man I will ever love. Every fear I carried, every secret I hid, I did it because I feared losing you more than anything else. "You will not lose me," he whispered. She stepped into him, the closeness slow and deliberate. Their foreheads touched, their breaths mingled. "I want to begin again," she murmured, as if this were the first day we ever met. Raphael smiled softly. "Then let us begin with something true." He lifted her hand, pressing a tender kiss to her fingers. "Isabella Bardi," he said quietly, "I love you." Her breath trembled and she whispered, "And I love you." He drew her gently into his arms, and she rested her head against his chest, breathing in the certainty she had long been denied. Outside, the bells of Florence marked the fading of day, but inside the palazzo time seemed to pause just for them. The worries, the rumors, the shadows, they no longer mattered. They stood wrapped in a closeness deeper than words, stronger than any whisper Carlo could craft, and sweeter than the early days of their marriage. When she finally lifted her face to his, her eyes were bright with emotion. "Raphael." "Yes?" "Kiss me." He did. It was soft at first, tender with the relief of reunion. Then warmer, fuller, carrying everything they had once feared to speak aloud. Her hands rose to his shoulders, his arms circled her waist, and the world narrowed to the simple truth of two hearts returning home to one another. When the kiss ended, she rested her forehead against his again. "Raphael, do you think this peace will last?" He smiled faintly. "Peace rarely lasts forever, but love can." She closed her eyes, letting his words settle deep inside her. "Come," he said softly. "Walk with me." He led her through the quiet halls, past the open doors and silent rooms, until they stepped into the courtyard where lanterns cast warm light across the evening air. They walked slowly, hand in hand, beneath the growing stars. Isabella whispered, "What shall we do now?" "Live," he replied, "fully, fearlessly, together." She looked up at him, and he saw the woman he had fallen in love with years ago, and the stronger, braver woman she had become. He framed her face gently. "Whatever tomorrow brings, Isabella, we face it with love, not fear." She smiled, radiant and sure. "Yes, with love." He drew her into another embrace, and she leaned into him with quiet joy, knowing at last that she was no longer alone, not in fear, not in danger, not in hope. Their journey had been tangled with secrets, burdened with whispers, shaken by doubt. But in the end, truth had brought them together more deeply than either imagined possible. As the lanterns flickered around them, and the soft hum of Florence faded into night, they held one another tightly. Two hearts reborn, united, and finally free. And when he kissed her again, it was not the kiss of uncertainty, nor the kiss of relief. It was the kiss of a love that had survived shadows and grown brighter because of them. Thank you so much for listening to this story all the way to the end. We hope it moved you as much as it moved us while telling it. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave us a comment telling us where you're listening from and what you liked the most. Rate this story from 0 to 10. What score would you give it? If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like as a show of support. That really motivates us to keep creating and sharing more stories full of emotion and life lessons. And before we go, we want to remind you that an exciting and heartwarming story recommendation will appear on the final screen. If you'd like to enjoy it, just click on the video. Thank you once again for being here, and we'll see you in the next story.